Welcome aboard the Quantum Daf Yomi interdimensional spaceship. We are on, we're in Tractate Zevachim, and we are on page 63. Daf Samach Gimel on the top of the page, with the words Amar Rami Bar Chama. Amar Rami Bar Chama. Whoa. Okay. Amar Rami Bar Chama. Kol kivshei kavashim shlosh amot le'ama chutz mikivsho shel mizbeach שהיה 3 אמות ומחצה ואצבע ושליש אצבע בזכרותה. Rami Bar Chama says the slope of each of the minor ramps was 1 cubit of rise per 3 cubits of run. This was true aside from the main ramp of the altar, which rose 1 cubit in 3.5 cubits, and 1 finger breadth and 1/3 of a finger breadth, measured by the tip of the thumb. The slope of the main ramp of the altar was slightly less than that of the minor ramps in order to make it easier for the priests to ascend the ramp while holding the sacrificial portions. Okay, and now we start a new Mishnah. The Mishnah says, Minachos hayunim nikmatzos b'chol makom hazareh v'nechalos lifnim min hakilayim l'zich l'kehuna b'chol machal l'yom v'layla al chatzos. Handfuls were removed from the meal offerings in any place in the temple courtyard, and were consumed within the area enclosed by the curtains by males of the priesthood, prepared in any form of food preparation that he chooses, for example, roasted or boiled, for 1 day and night until midnight. And that's the Mishnah. The Gemara, the Talmud says, Amar Rabbi Elazar, mincha shenik mitzah V'hechal k'shero shekein matzinu b'siduk b'zichin. Rabbi Elazar says a meal offering that had its handful removed in the sanctuary is valid, as we found with regard to the removal of the 2 bowls of frankincense that were placed beside the showbread on the temple, which was located in the sanctuary. On Shabbat, these bowls of frankincense were removed and burned on the altar, which allowed the showbread to be eaten. Removal of the bowls of frankincense paralleled the process of removing a handful from a meal offering, just as the removal of the bowls took place in the sanctuary. So could the removal of a handful of the meal offering be done in the sanctuary. Meisir Rabbi Yirmiyah v'kamatz b'sham Mimakom shiraglei azar amdos. Rabbi Yirmiyah raises an objection from a Braita. The verse states, with regard to the meal offerings, and he shall bring it to Aaron's sons, the priests, and he shall take from there his handful. Leviticus 2, verse 2. The term from there indicates that the handful must be taken from a place where the feet of the non-priest who brought the meal offering may stand, for example, the temple courtyard, but not the sanctuary, in direct contradiction to the opinion of Rabbi Elazar. Ben Betera Omer Binayishim Kamatz B'Smol Shiach Tzvik B'Yamin Tamalom Arisham B'Makom Shekamatz Kvar. The Braita continues, Ben Betera says, there is a different explanation of the verse. From where is it derived that if the priest removed a handful with his left hand, that he should return the handful to the vessel and then remove another handful with his right hand. The verse states, and he shall take from there his handful, indicating that he may take it from the place where he already removed a handful. Yikadiamri, hu demosiv la, hu mosiv la, hu befarik la. Yikadiamri, amar le Rabbi Kiva le Rabbi Yirmiyah bar Tachliva, asbir lach, lo nitzacha ela lachshir kol hazara kola. Okay. See? Spaceship. Okay. Where were we? Ika de Amri. Oh yeah. There are those who say that Rabbi Yirmiyah raises the objection and he resolves it. And there are those who say that Rabbi Kiva said to Rabbi Yirmiyah bar Tachlifa, I will explain to you the solution. The verse that indicates that the handful is taken from a place where non-priests may stand is necessary only to render the entire temple courtyard valid for removing the handful, but not to indicate that one may not take the handful in the sanctuary. This was necessary because it might enter your mind to say that since a burnt offering is one of the offerings of the most sacred order, and the meal offering is also one of the offerings of the most sacred order, just as a burnt offering requires slaughter specifically in the north side of the temple courtyard, so too a meal offering requires the taking of the handful specifically in the north side of the temple courtyard. The Gemara responds, what is notable about a burnt offering? It is notable in that it is completely burned upon the altar. Therefore, one would not have derived that just as a burnt offering must be slaughtered in the north side of the temple courtyard, the handful must be taken from a meal offering in the north side of the temple courtyard. And if one would attempt to derive that the handful of a meal offering must be taken in the north side of the temple courtyard from the halacha pertaining to a sin offering, which is an offering of the most sacred order, whose slaughtering must take place in the north side, yet is not completely consumed upon the altar, this too can be refuted. What is notable about a sin offering? It is notable in that it atones for those liable to receive karet. And if one would attempt to derive that the handful of the meal offering must be taken in the north side of the temple courtyard from the halacha pertaining to a guilt offering, which is an offering of the most sacred order that must be slaughtered in the north, and that does not share the unique characteristics of the burnt offering or the sin offering, this too can be refuted. What is notable about a guilt offering? It is notable in that it is one of the types of offerings whose sacrificial rites are performed with their blood, which is not so with regard to a meal offering. Mikulehu malikulehu sheken mine damim. The Gemara adds, it can also be suggested to draw an analogy from the common element shared by all of the offerings mentioned above. What is notable about all of them? They are notable in that they are all types of offerings whose sacrificial rites are performed with their blood. The Gemara presents a different answer. Rather, it was necessary for the bride to teach that the handful may be taken from the meal offering anywhere in the temple courtyard, because it may enter your mind to say that since it is written, and he shall bring it to the altar, Leviticus 2:8, and then it states, and he shall take up there his handful, Leviticus 6:8, indicating that the handful must be taken from the vessel in which the meal offering was brought near the altar, that the verses also indicate that the handful must be taken in the place where the vessel is brought near the altar. Ma hagasha b'kerem harav is deroimis, af k'mitzvah b'kerem harav is deroimis k'mash milan. Therefore, just as one must bring the meal offering to the southwest corner of the altar, so too the removal of its handful must take place at the southwest corner of the altar. To counter this, the Brisa teaches us that the removal of the handful may take place anywhere in the temple courtyard. Amar Rabbi Yochanan, Shlamim sheshachatan v'heichal ksherim shenemar v'shachatu oto petach oel moed v'lo yehei tafel chamor min ha'ikar. Rabbi Yochanan says peace offerings that one slaughtered in the sanctuary are valid, as is stated, and he shall slaughter it at the entrance of the tent of meeting, Leviticus 3:2, meaning in the courtyard, and the courtyard which is of second sanctity should not be weightier than the place of primary sanctity. Accordingly, as the offering is valid if it was slaughtered in the courtyard, it is certainly valid if it was slaughtered in the sanctuary. Meisve Rabbi Yochanan ben Betera Omer Minayishim Hikifu Goyim Es Kol Hazor Shekohanim Nechnasin Lesham Vaychlin Sham Kachikadashim Tov Lomar V'Kodesh HaKodashim Tochlenu. The more reason objection to Rabbi Yochanan's statement from Brisa. Rabbi Yochanan ben Betera says, from where is it derived that if Gentiles surrounded the entire temple courtyard and were attacking, making it impossible for the priests to remain there, the priests may enter that area, meaning the sanctuary, and eat the offerings of the most sacred order there? The verse states, in a most holy place you shall eat it. Numbers 18:10. The Gemara asks, but why is there a need to derive the halakha from this source? Let us say that can be derived from the verse, in the court of the tent of meeting they shall eat it, Leviticus 6:9. And the place of secondary sanctity should not be weightier than the place of the primary sanctity. Therefore, similar to Rabbi Yochanan's statement, if the sacrificial food can be eaten in the courtyard, it can certainly be eaten in the sanctuary. The fact that the Brisa requires another source indicates that Rabbi Yochanan's method of derivation is not valid. Hachi hashda, asam avoida de'adam oiveh b'mekam rabo, amrin lo yehei tafel chamor min ha'ikar, chila te'ein adam ochel b'mekam rabo, lo yehei tafel chamor min ha'ikar, lo amrin. The Gemara answers, how can these cases be compared? There, with regard to slaughtering offerings, the act of slaughter is a sacrificial rite, and a person serves in the presence of his master. Therefore, we say that the place of secondary sanctity should not be weightier than the place of primary sanctity. And if one can slaughter an offering in the courtyard, he can certainly do so in the sanctuary. By contrast, in the case of eating the sacrificial food, which is different because a person does not eat in the presence of his master, we do not say the rationale that the place of the secondary sanctity should not be weightier in the place of primary sanctity. Therefore, a verse was required to teach that the priest may partake of the offerings in the sanctuary. And that's the Talmud. And now we start the new Mishnah. Start the Mishnah, and we'll call it a day for this Amud. Okay, the Mishnah. Chatas ha'ov ha'isa na'seisal keren dromis baradis b'chol makom ha'isa k'shero ela zeh ha'isa mikoma shlosh zvorim ha'isa osa keren משמשת מלמטה ושלושים למעלה מלמטה חטאת העוף והגש ירד. The sacrificial rite of a bird sin offering would be performed at the southwest corner of the altar, and if its sacrificial rite was performed in any place on the altar, the offering was deemed valid, but that corner was its designated place. And there were three matters for which the portion of that corner below the red line that served as the demarcation between the upper and lower portions of the altar served as the proper location. And there were three matters for which the portion of that corner above the red line served as their proper location. The following rites were performed below the red line: sacrificing a bird sin offering and bringing meal offerings near the altar before the removal of the handful and pouring out the remaining blood. Okay. מלמעלה ניסוך היין והמים ואורס האוב שהיא רבה ממזרח, and the following rites were performed let's see, did I read this last line here? Sacrificing a bird sin offering and bringing meal offerings near the altar before removal of the handful and pouring out the remaining blood. Okay. Yeah. So and the following verses were performed. The following rites were performed above the red line: the wine libation that is brought together with animal offerings, or as an offering by itself, and the water libation of the festival of Sukkot, and sacrificing a burnt offering when they were numerous and it was impossible to perform the rite in the east, meaning the southeastern corner where the burnt offering was sacrificed, called Ha'olin Lemizbeach, Olin Dechimin. All those who ascend the ramp to the altar ascend via the right side of the ramp toward the southeast corner.